All right, very good. Again, thanks again. I've had a few people join since my introduction. Thank you for being here in today's class called Meal Prep Summer Edition. I made mention that this won't be the last meal prep class. I'm planning to do a meal prep class in the fall, the winter, and the spring, so we can cover all seasons and including all of those fresh fruits and vegetables that we have abundance with here in Michigan. But before we get started, I want to just go over these items here on the screen, and that is our Find Care and Help at Bronson information. So we have many resources to be able to assist you if you need help in finding any doctors or providers, or if you need any help in regards to billing. So initially, what we're going to start with here is our bronsonhealth.com Find a Doctor feature. If you're looking for a new primary care specialist, or if you are looking for a specialist in any area, maybe a cardiologist or an endocrinologist, you can go and search that feature for the available providers that are accepting new patients, or you can call our care advisor number there and they will be able to assist you with that as well. If you are a current Bronson patient and utilizing our MyChart, then if you have any questions about where to find a feature in MyChart, where to find test results, how to send a request for a prescription refill, if you need help or technical assistance with that, we've got Bronson Health Answers available at the phone number and email address listed on the screen, and they would be able to help you with those technical issues. If you have any billing or payment plan questions, then our Bronson Patient Accounting is available also at the phone number listed on the screen. And then the last resource I want to review for you is our price estimator tool. Whether you're using Bronson MyChart or not, we have an estimator tool and an estimator team that can help you estimate what your cost out of pocket will be if you've been referred for a service, maybe like an x-ray, and you want to know how much that's going to cost you after getting that service done. They can give you an estimation of your out-of-pocket expenses. And again, you can do that through Bronson MyChart, or you can call the estimator team at the phone number listed on the screen. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started, and I am going to start us off with a couple of poll questions today. You should see a poll pop up on your screen here in just a moment. A very simple question of, do you currently meal prep? So your options here are yes, sometimes, no, I'm not really sure about this meal prep thing. So go ahead and answer to the best answer that meets your needs there right now. And it sounds like most of you guys have already answered that poll question, and it looks like you guys are somewhere in that sometimes. A few of you yes, a few of you no, and most of you are saying sometimes you do meal prep. I agree, that's kind of where I land myself too, especially when I'm going to have a much busier week than another. All right, very good. Thank you guys for sharing that. And then I'm going to have another poll question for those that you said maybe yes or sometimes you are meal prepping. How often are you doing that meal prep? So I'm going to go ahead and issue that poll. So if you answered yes or sometimes, how often do you end up meal prepping? Is it a couple of times a month? Is it once a week? Couple of times per week, or only when you need to? And it looks like that couple times per month, and that might not be an option you get to select. So if that is where you are landing, feel free to add that to the chat too. It looks like a couple of times per week, or only when you need to is what most of you guys are saying. A couple of times per week, or only when you need to. All right, very good. Thank you guys for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll as well. Thank you guys so much. All right, so what are our goals for our time together today? My goal for our hour together today is that we're going to just give a big overview picture of what meal prepping is. We're going to review the basics of meal prepping, but also the benefits to meal prepping and why it might be helpful to you in your day-to-day life. We're going to learn how to use some of those meal prep techniques in looking at some of our everyday recipes I'm going to leave you guys with a variety of different meal ideas that are going to be quick to be meal prepped, along with some recipes as well that would be easy to meal prep, utilizing lots of our seasonal summer produce. So that is what we are going to do in our time spent. So to get started, what is meal prepping? And I think everybody takes a bit of a different approach to meal prepping. And so there are a variety of different takes on this that I want to go over. First, meal prepping could include making a full meal ahead of time and then portion it out into individual containers to use, whether it be for the freezer or for the family or for yourself for lunches and dinners moving forward for the remainder of the week. So then you're only cooking one time, but having many meals available just for the sake of convenience. And those type of ideas come from like making a large batch of soup or maybe a full casserole that you just make one time and you've got multiple meals to eat off of. Another approach to meal prepping is like batch cooking, right? So you're making a large amount of one particular ingredient. So you've got it available in the freezer. So when it is time to make your healthy meal, you can just pull it out and thaw it. I do a lot of batch cooking and freezing myself, and that might be things like egg muffins or egg cups for a quick breakfast item. We're going to look at some of those ideas later. Or maybe you're making a large batch of meatballs that you'll portion out into individual containers for the freezer. I do things like, making stuffed cabbage rolls that can kind of just go into the freezer and just be an easy, quick meal for myself later on. Another approach to meal prepping is individually portioning out meals. So that might be something like making individual jars of an overnight oat that you're going to have in the refrigerator, and then you've got that available for yourself in the morning. One of my former coworkers had done a jar salad cooking class, and that lends itself quite nicely to being an option for just an individually portioned meal for the refrigerator, or even grain bowls. We're going to talk about those too. Another approach to meal prepping, and that might be where some of you guys say sometimes, is just prepping the individual ingredients ahead of time. And that might be like you bought 3 different peppers, and so you know you're going to need the green peppers to be going to be diced for the week, and you know you're going to need the orange and the red peppers to be in strips or sliced long ways, so you can have those for snacks. So you're simply just prepping the vegetable or the fruit or any other ingredient ahead of time, so it's already in its easy to serve, easy to use form at the time that you're actually going to be assembling or cooking your meal. So many different approaches to meal prepping. They all work, right? Whatever works for you and the time that you have that you want to spend on preparing some of these meals in advance. But what are some of the benefits of prepping out your meals ahead of time? I've mentioned a couple of times now that I will do some meal prepping more so when I know that I'm going to have a very busy week ahead of me, maybe some late nights, and you're not going to have a whole lot of time to be in the kitchen and actually cooking and chopping and doing all of those things in that moment. So by having some meals on hand already, or at least having some of those ingredients already prepped out and in the refrigerator, you can either have just a quick go-to meal right at that moment that all you'd have to do is warm up, or you've got already everything kind of cut up and you can assemble something fairly quickly. So it is convenient during the week when you're actually preparing the meal, but obviously prepping meals does require a little pre-work as well, and we're going to talk about how to kind of plan that out. Prepping meals also can reduce some of the food waste, right? If we've got whole fruits and vegetables sitting in the refrigerator and we just didn't have the time to use them because we didn't have the time to wash and cut and portion out, they may go to waste in the refrigerator. But by having them already prepped out, cut up just so you can use them during the week, you may save some grocery money, which is always important. And obviously just reducing waste that goes into our landfills from food is always a good thing too. If you tend to dine out frequently, because you don't necessarily have those convenient and healthy meals on hand in that moment, and it may just feel easier to dine out, grab some fast food, then you may save some money that way by having these meals already portioned out and relying less on dining out. And if you're only cooking for just maybe 1 or 2 people in your home, having those individually portioned out meals for the week might be a really convenient option so you're not having to cook multiple meals throughout the week. But I take that and say also some other considerations is that when we're meal prepping, we tend to have the same meal available for multiple days in a row potentially. And so if you're somebody that doesn't necessarily like to eat leftovers, this may be challenging for you in that way. And then other considerations to take into mind is that you'll have to probably have multiple storage containers available. So you might have to have a good inventory of storage containers available in your kitchen. So you can have them available for your peppers and then your already pre-portioned spaghetti or whatever it ends up being. So you may have multiple storage containers to work with. Before we actually start talking about meal prepping, though, I just want to remind us that when we are planning out any meal, and generally when we're doing some meal prepping, we are working on planning out those meals because we want them to be healthy meals. I'm giving you the visual guide. If some of you guys haven't seen this, I've used this in previous classes as well. And this is from the Harvard School of Public Health. This is their version of the healthy eating plate. It's a good visual reminder that whenever we're planning out any of our breakfast, lunch, or dinner, we're always trying to aim for all of those various food groups. So in looking at this healthy eating plate, and we can visualize what our meal prep meal looks like too, we think about those storage containers. We can use this exact same concept in a storage container and have a healthy, balanced meal that is majority vegetables, maybe a side of fruit with a whole grain, which we're going to talk about in a little bit as well, and a good healthy protein, always ensuring that we've got those healthy fats included in our meal as well, whether that be the use of an olive oil in our meal prep meal, or maybe we've got some nuts or seeds on the side to provide that healthy fat too, and always water as our primary beverage source. We can have some dairy sources as well with the healthy eating plate here. And so that might be easy to meal prep by just having like a small side of cottage cheese or yogurt, or maybe you're putting cheese in your dish too. Oh, let's talk a little bit further here about some of these other areas like batch cooking, which I mentioned I tend to do a little bit more of, so I can put them in the freezer, but it doesn't always have to go into the freezer. Batch cooking may simply mean that you're making a large amount of, let's say, maybe a whole grain, as I was mentioning before, packed with protein, packed with fiber, just as beans and lentils are, or you just might be making a big batch of soup to have on hand for the week. In doing a large batch of grains, like maybe a brown rice or a quinoa, it lends itself quite nicely to be able to make quick weekday meals like grain bowls. And if you've not had a grain bowl before, it's simply maybe like a brown rice, maybe a bulgur, maybe a barley, maybe a quinoa, as I was mentioning, generally mixed with some sort of a bean, like maybe a garbanzo bean or a black bean. Maybe you would add a little extra meat protein on there as well. That's totally fine. And then you could really throw in a bunch of roasted vegetables that you had already roasted on the weekend, portioned out into your storage containers for the week, and you can assemble a very quick meal. So by batch cooking these whole grains like brown rice or quinoa, or even if you're doing like a whole grain pasta and you want to do a pasta salad, that lends itself quite nicely too to just have on hand. I don't tend to make large pots of beans. I am all for the sake of convenience with a canned, no salt added bean. I can have those pretty easy on hand, drain and rinse those with water, reducing sodium content even further, and they're very handy to have on hand if you want to make some of these grain bowls, or by adding them to your salads, right? We tend to think of meal prep and having like large salads to be available for us. So by having these beans on hand, it can add a lot of fiber and protein to your salads, which we need when we eat salad. Salad doesn't tend to keep us full for very long if we're just utilizing vegetables. And so having that protein and fiber from beans on the salad can be very beneficial. If you are trying to decrease your meat intake potentially, maybe lower your saturated fat for the purposes of heart health, you might use something like a black bean and do a half black bean, half ground meat, right? So think about things like tacos potentially. I'm sure we can come up with some other ideas there too, but beans and ground meat, you can kind of do half and half. So having a large pot of beans available and in the refrigerator stored to kind of make some of these healthy meals quickly is always a good idea too. And then, soup for the freezer is not bad. Then we think about the prepping ahead, right? So this is what I was referring to when I talk about decreasing the cost of groceries spent and decreasing food waste that goes into the landfill. If we can kind of prep ahead, right? We see that picture of that woman just looking at all those things, right? We got fresh tomatoes, there's eggplant in there, it looks like, and cucumbers. Everything is whole. She looks like she is in a hurry and she needs a meal fast. And by having those things kind of already pre-sliced, those things will keep for a good 2 to 3 days in the refrigerator. If you pre-slice your cucumbers, maybe pre-chop your tomatoes. We're going to kind of go over some food safety and food tips at the end of the class as well. And so you might have to do that a couple of times per week, but it will decrease your grocery cost spent. So when we're looking at meal prepping and prepping ahead, what are some things that we can do to set ourselves up for success when we are trying to work more on meal prepping? That might be something like making vinaigrette. I like to make vinaigrette in one of those protein blender shaker bottles. It's a nice pourable container. I can have a few days worth of vinaigrette on hand and stick them in my refrigerator when I need them. Decreasing your sodium and saturated fat potentially by buying a store-bought salad dressing. If you're not purchasing lettuce that's not already kind of pre-bagged, pre-washed, and you're just buying like a head of lettuce, then having that already washed, dried out, chopped into storage containers, again, maybe about 2 to 3 days worth at a time is probably what it will keep for the best quality, but that would set you up for success. And that could be spinach as well to throw into pasta sauces or any form of skillet that you might be making. Again, we're always trying to sneak those fruits and vegetables in whenever possible. If we've got things like, eggplant or zucchini or summer squash or peppers that are about to be here in the summertime, we can roast or grill those ahead of time and store those for later use, especially when it comes to utilizing those grains that we had already batch cooked previously and making a quick stir fry or one of those grain bowls. And again, I was mentioning like just dicing up maybe some onions and peppers to have on hand. So all you have to do is just take a couple of tablespoons full and throw them into whatever dish. Like maybe you're scrambling up some eggs in the morning, you can sneak those vegetables in. All right, so I want to hear from you guys. My question for you, not a poll question, you're going to drop this in the chat, but my question for you is what ingredient, right, do you always have prepped and ready for meals? Go ahead and type your answer in the chat. If you don't want to type and you want to unmute and share it, please feel free to do that as well. How I would answer this is always lettuce and spinach. But that doesn't really require a whole lot of work on my end because I enjoy purchasing the pre-washed, triple washed lettuce and spinach. So I can just have that on hand and throw it into any sort of pasta or make a quick salad. All right, I've got some questions or some answers rolling in. So let's see what you all are saying. So the ingredient that you guys like to always have prepped on hand and ready to throw into meals are onions, cheese, love that. Whether it be a block of cheese and kind of shredding them ahead of time into storage containers. That takes a little work and thought, so that's great. Chicken and ground turkey. Okay, so batch cooking some chicken breasts and having those available so you can throw them into any of these options that we've been talking about and having those in different forms, right? Keeping some of that chicken in full breast form, but also maybe then dicing up some of that chicken in a separate container for salads and stir fries. Very good. Amber says herbs from my garden, always have on hand, right? Those are easy to just snip and use fresh. That might also be preserving your fresh herbs, whether that be drying out or sticking in little ice or olive oil ice cube trays, right? To throw into your sauteed vegetables when you're doing that. Lettuce and spinach, I'm right there with you, Candy. Ground beef, perfect. Always have vegetables chopped up. Love to make stir fry. Stir fry is such a classic, easy go-to meal, right? You get all of your food groups in there. You get your whole grains if you're using brown rice, your veggies, your protein, onions and lettuce, and all of the veggies. Very good. Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. Those are good ideas there. All right. So a lot of the ideas that you guys have shared that you like to have prepped out ahead of time can be really good options to use in some of these individual portion meals that I was referring to. Individual meals are good, especially if you've got that busy schedule. You just need a quick grab and go meal. Maybe you're on your way to your kids' soccer practice, or you just need to take lunch to work. Having those things already in a storage container and being able to throw them in your lunch bag, your cooler bag, and go, always a great option. But these individual portions are always good things to think out when we're talking about our snacks too. So some of the ideas here are like snack bag size of like making a homemade trail mix, or just throwing in those individual portioned out snack bag sides of unsalted nuts. That's a fine option. Hummus and veggies, right? You guys were talking a lot about cutting up your veggies ahead of time and having those available for snacks, whether it be a veggie dip or maybe even making your own hummus ahead of time so you can use it as a spread on wraps and sandwiches or as a dip for your vegetables. But those also really lend themselves great as a sauce of sorts for a grain bowl too. I see oatmeal in the chat. So I'm going to talk a little bit about baked oatmeal as a good breakfast option, but overnight oats is another good option if anybody has done those before. A quick, easy breakfast in the morning. You just do a little prep work a couple of days ahead of time, having 3 servings in the refrigerator, and you're good to go for the next 3 mornings. This is really good, especially for people that struggle to get breakfast in the morning, myself included. Right? It gets rushed and it gets busy in the morning. You're running out the door without anything to eat. And so something like this can be a good thing to have on hand. And then we've talked about salads already. So what are foods that lend themselves quite nicely to being prepped in our food prep containers? And that is what I've got listed out on my screen right now. I've talked a bit about having those whole grains already available and whole grain pasta. When we're looking especially at individual portion size meals and meal prepping ahead of time, we're really looking for lack of a better word, like sturdy foods, right? They're really going to hold up to being stored and cut up and maybe be sitting with some sauces for the next 2 to 3 days until we get to them. So things like having cooked grains or pasta can marinate well with different sauces and seasonings. Having our cooked meat on hand, of course, our cooked beans that we were talking about. And then I say hearty vegetables, right? So things like maybe a cucumber, right? That might get a little soft after being kind of sliced and on a salad for 2 to 3 days. But if you cut up raw broccoli or cauliflower, that's going to lend itself to being stored in that capacity, and it's going to be a better quality when you get to it for the next 2 to 3 days. So think about those sorts of things when I say hearty vegetables, and I have a slide that's coming up next to kind of go over some of those things too. Whole fruit. So things like obviously your apples and your oranges, right, are easy. They don't require a lot of prep work ahead of time other than washing. And I say whole fruit because if we're going to be washing strawberries or blueberries or slicing those up ahead of time, then that is going to probably get a little soggy in the next couple of days. You guys mentioned cheese, I mentioned nuts and seeds, and then dip like the hummus that I was referring to. When we're talking about seasonality here in Michigan, this is from the Michigan Farmers Market Association. I've used this in previous classes as well. So let's take a look at what is even in season during the summer months. So when we're looking at our fruits, things like apricots and peaches and plums are easy to have on hand that are just going to require a quick wash that you can do ahead of time and then just have those available for your quick grab and go, throw them into your lunchbox and you're good. Things like berries that are coming into season, don't wash those ahead of time because they're going to get soggy. So those are going to require washing at the same time that you're using them. But when we're looking at meal prep meals and having things on hand so we can get our fruit in, then things like melon, like our cantaloupe and our watermelon, having those pre-cut up and portion meals, those are usually good for a good 2 to 3 days after you've cut them up. Those would be more like what I'm referring to when I say more of a meal prep appropriate type of fruit. And then when I was mentioning hardy vegetables, things like our cruciferous vegetables, which I've done another class on. And so those are like broccoli, cauliflower, maybe your cabbage and your Brussels sprouts. Those are more sturdy. They're going to hold up better to any sauces or the storage of being with other items too. Potatoes, if you're going to roast potatoes, those lend themselves well to being kept in storage containers. And then sturdy leafy green lettuce, like iceberg lettuce probably isn't going to lend itself very well, but if we're doing something like a romaine or a kale, it's a thicker, more fibrous leafy green, and that would lend itself quite well to being utilized in these meal prep meals. All right, so next question for you guys is, what is your favorite meal to just prep on hand, right? Some of you guys said yes, and sometimes. So what is the favorite meal to prep and always have kind of sitting around and in the refrigerator as your grab and go option? Go ahead and put that in the chat, or if you want to, come off mute and you can share. Oh, fruit salad, very good, yes. Having a mixture of fruits available in a bowl so you can kind of portion those out real quick for yourselves. That's very good. Pasta salad, that's a good idea too. Yes, I should have shared a pasta salad today and I didn't. I was looking at some really good Mediterranean pasta salad options. All right, you guys love to make some fruit salad. I love it. Chopped veggies and hummus, yes. Classic snack, easy go-to. Makes it a whole lot easier when you got those vegetables already pre-chopped. Scrambled eggs, very good. Yes, we're going to talk about some egg casseroles and egg muffins here coming up in a second. So, meat for spaghetti and veggies for stir fry. Very good. All right, so let's move on then and let's talk about some steps for successful meal prepping. Meal prepping can feel a little overwhelming, just like meal planning can feel a little overwhelming, trying to like write out all of your meals and snacks that you're going to have for the day. So if you're kind of new to meal prepping, my suggestion would be just to start really small. So maybe you're not doing any meal prepping at all. My goal for you, or my challenge for you, would just be to be prepping one meal to start off, maybe in this coming week, right? So maybe it's having a prepped breakfast item on hand to make life a little bit easier, or one prepped dinner option that is going to cut down your cooking time in the kitchen for the next 2 to 3 days. So start small. Be gentle with yourself and working through these changes and doing meal prep. It is good to have a plan on hand though, right? Writing out your meals and snacks. And that's what I was saying, like keep it simple. You might have the same lunch 2 days in a row, just to keep it a little bit easier for yourself. That's okay. And then picking a day, because it's going to take a little time to get those peppers diced up and those scrambled eggs prepped and those hummus made potentially. And so pick a day of the week or the weekend that you just feel like you have a little bit more time to focus and dedicate to the washing and the prepping of these fruits and vegetables that we're talking about. So you can make your life a little bit easier in the coming days. Other things to consider when we are doing our meal prep is ensuring that we've got adequate storage. I was mentioning earlier that it's going to take some extra meal prep storage containers. So ensuring that you've got enough space in your kitchen to have some of these containers on hand. If you're looking for quick lunches to go, you may consider having storage containers that are microwavable. So you can just pop them in the microwave, warm them up real quick for a quick meal. So that's like BPA-free plastic, or you could do glass, like Snapware type of containers. My personal favorite is the glass containers. They're just a little bit more sturdy. They lend themselves to the microwave just fine, obviously allowing for a minute or so to cool down so you're not burning your hands. And then they don't stain. So I like that about some glass containers. And some of the previous pictures that we were looking at, we were also looking at containers that had dividers. And that might be really important when you're doing things like blueberries or cucumbers that may not want to be kind of mixed in with other things to decrease any sogginess that you might experience in those. So consider containers with dividers. It's always good to have your containers be clear so you can remember what you put in there, or if you're using colored containers, then to use just some labels to write on the outside of what you've prepared and what day you prepared it, so you know that it's only good for about 2 to 3 days after that, or put the expiration date on it too. Maybe even have some mason jars on hand. Having some mason jars on hand for some of those jam jar salads that I'm going to talk about a little bit, or the overnight oats, and then storage bags too for those quick portioned out snacks that we were talking about, like some trail mix or some nuts, or maybe you chopped up your peppers for your hummus and you want to put your peppers in a storage bag. And then obviously you're going to probably have to take into consideration how much fridge and freezer room that you have available. So some people with more fridge and freezer space might be able to prep a little bit more, but that's something to consider, making sure that you have enough room to properly store it in your refrigerator once you have already made those ingredients and meals. And I've got a question in the chat. It says, is it okay to store the food in the plastic containers or freeze them? Yes, it's okay to store the food in the plastic container in the refrigerator, and I've stored plastic in the freezer and had no issues. If anybody else wants to chime in on that, feel free. I've not had any issues. So feel free to chime in if you've got any other experience in freezing in plastic containers. All right, so let's talk about some ideas. So first, let's talk about some breakfast ideas that are easy to meal prep. So has anybody in the room done egg muffins or those egg cups, right? So in a mixing bowl, you simply just have your scrambled eggs. You might throw in your cheese or your pre-diced and chopped vegetables like your peppers and onions. You might throw in some of those handfuls of spinach. You might throw in a little sausage potentially or some black beans, and you just whip them up real quick. You stick them in the muffin tins, you bake them, and those are really easy to be portioned out into little storage bags so you can have them on hand, thaw them out and warm them up in the morning, and you've got yourself a quick breakfast that didn't take you a whole lot of time. Somebody also says they've been using plastic containers in the freezer for years with no problem, so thank you for supporting that. Somebody else says that they use egg muffins, love to freeze them, works great. Somebody else was also mentioning Rubbermaid containers used to freeze soups and stews. The 2-cup containers, that's a good portion size. Absolutely, and using them as a frozen entree. So yes, I think we are using plastic in the freezer with no issues. Thank you guys, appreciate that. Same concept with an egg casserole, right? And maybe on those warmer days, we don't necessarily want to be baking in the oven, but there are plenty of egg casserole recipes out there utilizing the slow cooker. You can do egg casserole in the slow cooker, make it overnight, have a hot, fresh breakfast for yourself in the morning, store the rest in the refrigerator in portioned out containers, and you've got yourself breakfast for the week. And then I am going to get you guys some recipes to put in the chat here. And the first recipe that I'm going to share with you guys is a baked oatmeal. Somebody already mentioned that they like to make oatmeal as one of their meal prep meals. So this is a baked oatmeal, good to have on hand, especially if you like oatmeal, a very heart healthy ingredient. So put that in the chat. Feel free to click on the link and have that open up on your screen so you can save that for after the class and be able to look at, or during the class. Feel free to do that too. I am going to include all of these recipe links on the handout at the end of the class that we put together that will be on our Bronson Eats website. That should be posted in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So all of these website links will be listed there as well. And then some of you had also mentioned overnight oats. I really enjoy those. I don't necessarily like to eat them cold. So even when I am doing an overnight oat in the morning in a mason jar, I like to just kind of put that in the microwave for a minute or so and kind of warm that up. So there is a blueberry and banana overnight oat recipe in the chat for you guys as well. And then it doesn't always have to require a recipe, right? We can come up with some of these things that we already had pre-portioned out in the refrigerator to make a quick breakfast, right? So some of you guys talked about pre-prepping scrambled eggs. So you might have your scrambled eggs already. You might need to cook those scrambled eggs, but then you might already have the sausage pre-cooked. Throw that into your egg scramble with a little cheese that you guys were talking about, a little salsa. Mix that all together. You got yourself a little taco scramble for the breakfast time, or you can throw that into a taco shell and make yourself a breakfast taco, or think about even like a pita pocket, right? You can throw that into a pita pocket pretty quickly, and that might be more of a to-go option for us that are on the run in the mornings. And again, if we have hard-boiled eggs already prepped out in the refrigerator, we can grab a couple of those with that fruit salad and those fruit cups that you guys were talking about that you already like to have prepped and available in your refrigerator, a little yogurt cup, a sprinkle of granola. We've got ourselves a very good, healthy, quick breakfast without a lot of time in the morning. All right, so then let's look at some lunch ideas. Let's see if I can clear that annotation. There we go. All right, so some lunch ideas. Again, these don't have to always be recipe involved. So think about, what do we have on hand that is quick and easy, right? We've got our pre-prepped tomatoes, our onions, our cucumbers already in the refrigerator. We got a can of garbanzo beans or chickpeas. We can throw those together for a beautiful chickpea salad with maybe like an Italian vinaigrette or an Italian dressing that marinates quite nicely together, that we can kind of have stored in our storage containers for a quick, nutritious lunch. That's an idea. You could throw it on top of a bed of lettuce if you'd like to as well. And then I'm going to share with you guys this quick grape and apple chicken salad. Chicken salad, tuna salads tend to lend themselves quite nicely for meal prep. They can hang out in the refrigerator for a good 3 to 5 days and still be good quality. So you've got the quick grape and chicken salads sitting there in the chat for you guys as well. And we're always thinking about, again, how can we sneak these fruits and vegetables in? So this is a basic chicken salad. This is nothing new. We've heard of this before, but it includes grapes, it includes apples, so we can get those seasonal produce items in. And then you can also add in your celery and your green onions too. We were talking about having quinoa on hand. We've talked about having quinoa available in the refrigerator already pre-cooked. Quinoa lends itself quite nicely to just going over a bed of lettuce, so we can have that prepped in the refrigerator, or some of those bean and grain bowls that I was talking about, throwing in those roasted vegetables that we already have in the refrigerator, throwing some of that hummus on top. for that sauce. And then obviously we can't pre-prep that avocado too much because it goes brown so badly, or so quickly, I guess I should say. And but avocado can also be purchased frozen, and so that might help you out when your meal prep process too. We won't say anything more about salads. I think we've hit that pretty well. But then also think about all of these things that we're talking about when we're doing bowls, like the grain bowl, the bean bowl, or anything that we can put on top of salad. If you want a more substantial lunch, you can always do the wraps too. Hummus doesn't, you can do hummus on this as a spread on your wrap, kind of have those pre-prepped probably just 1 to 2 days in advance so that wrap doesn't get as soggy in that process. But the jam jar salads, I really do want to give you guys this recipe, and I forgot to, let me get that to the chat. I forgot to put the link in my cheat sheet here. So give me a second and see if I can get this one into the chat. All right, I'm going to do that one at the end of class, but I do want to share that one with you. That one will just take me a little bit more time. So I'll finish up the rest of this information and then we will get the jam jar salads listed. But that is, we did a class on that, so it's a PDF version. And if I can't get it into the chat, then I will send it out in the reminder email for you guys after the class. And then we come to dinners. So I love beans. Maybe you've heard me talk about beans so far a few times today. And so one of these recipes from the Domestic Dietitian website is an easy bean salad. Beans are easy to have on hand. And this is mixed with our fresh summer tomatoes and onions. You could do your fresh herbs that you guys were talking about too, like some cilantro, some parsley in that bean salad. Again, easy to have on hand. You can make the bean salad its own meal. You can throw it in a wrap as part of that. You could throw it on the side with some scrambled eggs. Easy to have in the refrigerator and versatile to include in lots of other meals. If we are prepping veggies ahead of time, then you can do something as quick as a quesadilla for a quick summer meal. And so this recipe is a farmer's market vegetarian quesadilla from allrecipes.com. Sharing you guys that one. And then the last one is when we were talking about prepping meatballs on hand. These are feta meatballs and using zucchini noodles. So zucchini we know will be a hot commodity here in a moment. Sorry. And making noodles out of those are quick and easy to have on hand too. You can prep those and have those in the refrigerator. This is a baked meatball recipe, but you could totally saute that if that lends itself better to maybe some warm weather in a hot kitchen. And so zucchini noodles are good to have on hand in that recipe as well. And then the last recipe that I want to share with you that is good to have on hand and doesn't have anything to do with fruits and vegetables in the summertime are these Power Bites that we have on our bronsonhealth.com website. These Power Bite recipes utilize oatmeal that we were talking about earlier. You can put sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds in them, maybe a little cocoa powder. Maybe you've had a variety of this before, but they're a good snack option to have in those pre-portioned bags, or you can throw them in the freezer for a good 2 to 3 months, have those on hand as a quick little nutritious sweet treat. So that is one option that I'd like to share with you guys to have on hand in the freezer so we can continue with our meal prep journey and nutritious eating. And then what I want to leave with you guys lastly here is food storage and safety tips. I won't go over these, but as you're looking at them on the screen, this is just a guide as to how long you can keep these items in your refrigerator. So I was mentioning, if you're going to be cooking up your grilled or roasted vegetables, like your zucchini, your summer squash, maybe even your tomatoes, that's going to keep good from a food safety perspective in your refrigerator for a good 3 to 4 days. If you were doing some batch cooking of beans, like some black beans or some garbanzo beans, those are going to be good for about 3 days. Same if you're going to do batch cooking of brown rice or quinoa. And I'll let you guys continue on looking at some of those food storage tips. All right, so that comes to the end of the content that I had that I wanted to discuss when it comes to meal prepping for our summer edition. So I want to hear from you guys real quick. What is one thing that you learned today that you are hoping to utilize in the next week to help you increase your journey with meal prepping and making life a little bit easier for you? So go ahead and type that in the chat or feel free to unmute and share what you plan on doing with some of this information that we've discussed today. And while you guys are working on that, I'm going to try to get these jam jar salad recipes into the chat. Everybody always loves the recipes, right? I know. I can't do a class without sharing some recipes. All right, so prepping more meals in general, not just separate ingredients, like the food safety chart. Always wonder what is the max? Yes. And so also to add to that then, Gail, when you're talking about the food safety chart, there is a website called foodkeeper.gov. And there's an app as well, Foodkeeper, and it will tell you, based upon some of the ingredients that you have, how long you can keep them stored in the refrigerator and how long you can keep them stored in the freezer. So foodkeeper.gov. Planning on trying out some of these recipes. Very interesting and yummy, very good. Adding rice and quinoa to my prepared items to keep ready. Yeah, they're just a handy whole grain to have on hand. Some new ideas for recipes. It is always good to have some variety egg muffins. Yes, you're welcome for Foodkeeper. Number of days to keep different foods. Okay, it's good. I like to know what you guys are kind of taking away from some of these conversations, especially as I continue to plan out additional meal prep classes. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.